Today is January 9th, 2025, exactly 1 year, from the day Naziah Harris disappeared. Several people failed her. I don't know where her mother is.
I saw her as she was walking. I never saw her face. I just remember her having on a colorful jacket.
This young lady was so afraid. Shannon's telling me this. She ran upstairs, frantic and afraid and scared, and wanting to go home and wanted to call her mother because Jarvis touched her inappropriately while she was in the basement playing with the puppy.
Mr. Butt, stand up. You groomed Naziah. You played mind games with her. We all heard that. You controlled her emotionally. She was exposed to so much at such a young age. The text messages between you two were disgusting to hear. And to think that she had you saved in her phone as bae for life. Naziah deserves so much more. And while I mentioned other people that failed her, Jarvis Butts, you are the monster.
This is Naziah Harris, a 13-year-old girl from Detroit who stepped off her school bus on January 9th, 2024 and was never seen alive again. The man who killed her had been in her life for years, calling himself her uncle, using her own family to get close to her. He got sentenced to decades in prison, and 2 weeks later, he turned up dead in his cell. But before we get to that, we have to go all the way back, because the story of how Jarvis Butts got close enough to this child to destroy her life is something the whole community needs to hear and understand. Jarvis Ramon Butts was born November 21st, 1982, and grew up in the Detroit and Highland Park area of Michigan. He was a mechanic, someone who worked at auto repair shops around the city. On the outside, he looked like a regular man from the neighborhood, someone people knew and trusted. But Jarvis Butts had a history that should have kept him far away from any child, and the courts knew it. Back in 2005, he was convicted of third-degree criminal intimate conduct against a victim between the ages of 13 and 15. He served time in the Michigan Department of Corrections and was released in January of 2014. And what happened almost immediately after he got out? He went right back to doing this same thing.
We were told that he was no longer on parole and that he could be around children. Yep. But I thought the law was that you can't even live in the vicinity of school. So how is it that you can live in a house with children that are not yours, which it really didn't matter if they was his or not. He violated them. So, but that's what we were told. Most recently, when all this stuff happened, they said that's why. It was a birthday party in February of 2022 for her second daughter's birthday. And most of the children, pretty much all the children were at the house, the grandchildren. There was one little girl who was another, Annette's other sister's daughter was there. Now, this child had never been around Jarvis alone before. Or I think she might have been at the birthday party or something, adult birthday party, but it was at a hall. But she was at Shannon's home, and this young lady was so afraid. Shannon's telling me this. She ran upstairs, frantic and afraid and scared, and wanting to go home and wanted to call her mother because Jarvis touched her inappropriately while she was in the basement playing with the puppy.
Prosecutors would later describe him in court as a man who specifically targeted women with young daughters because that gave him easy access to children. That was his whole system, and that is how he operated. One of the women he targeted was Shannon Harris, who was Naziah's biological aunt on her mother's side. Butts had been in a long on-and-off relationship with Shannon for over 12 years and was the father of 5 of her children.
How did he even come into contact? I'm trying to figure out, how did she get in contact with him? She lived in one residence and he lived in another. What was the connection of the contact?
As far as Naziah?
Yes.
Her aunt, my niece, her aunt Shannon. That was her boyfriend, the father of her children. Wherever Shannon was, he was. Shannon was always over Annette's house prior to moving back in with her. I think she moved back in maybe August or something of 2023. She
And
was
is
living in a townhome that I let her go live in. She was living in a townhome. It's a Section 8 townhome. I incomed out of it when I graduated from nursing school. I signed it over to her, thinking it would be a stepping stone to help her and her children. And we would keep it in the family, and maybe the next person who needed a stepping stone to go finish school or whatever can use it. Well, Shannon got evicted from that townhome because of her and her shenanigans with Jarvis. So she ended up having to move back in with Annette sometime in August or September of 2023. That's how she got back in the home with Annette. But prior to that, Naziah was with Shannon all the time at her home.
Relationship is exactly how he got into the Harris family's world, and exactly how he positioned himself as a trusted uncle figure to Naziah. Naziah was born on September 16, 2010, and lived mainly with her grandmother, Annette Harris, in Detroit. She attended J.E. Clark Preparatory Academy, had no history of getting into trouble, no history of running away, nothing that would make her family worry about her safety. She was just a young girl living with her grandmother, surrounded by family, and Butts was part of that family circle, which meant he had time and access and zero supervision. According to lead detective Sergeant Shannon Jones, who testified during the preliminary examination in January of 2025, Butts began sending Naziah sexually explicit text messages as far back as June of 2022, when she was 11 or 12 years old. He was asking her for photos and was setting up meetings with her at his auto shop. He used pet names with her and told her repeatedly to delete their messages after reading them, because he knew exactly what he was doing and he knew it was wrong. And Naziah, who was a child being manipulated by a grown man she had been taught to trust, went along with it. Those meetings at the auto shop were where the abuse was taking place. One of Butts and Shannon's own daughters, who was around 8 or 9 years old at the time, later testified in court that she had seen Butts having intimate connections with Naziah at the shop on more than one occasion. She said it was not the first time she had witnessed it, and she also told the court that Butts had tried to do the same thing to her, but she recognized what was happening and refused. A child, 8 or 9 years old, had to figure out on her own how to protect herself from this man. That right there tells you how deep this ran. What makes this even harder to sit with is that people outside the family had raised red flags before any of this reached this point. There were complaints sent to Child Protective Services and to the Detroit Police Department as far back as 2022, with at least one report specifically naming Naziah as a possible victim of Butts' abuse. The report described Butts as a registered felon. Detroit police later admitted to a local news outlet that they received a CPS referral in 2022 about a complaint that Butts had touched Naziah inappropriately, and they never opened an investigation. They never called or checked on her.
That Jarvis was a sex offender almost 12 years ago.
Wow.
And I asked Shannon about it. I stumbled. She didn't tell me. I stumbled over it because of a situation where he had got arrested and had her daughter in his custody at that time. He had the child, and we had to go get the baby because he got arrested. So I was looking him up to see what he got arrested for. Then it popped up his Otis information saying that he was a sex offender and had sexually assaulted a child under the age of 13. And I looked at Shannon and I was like, Shannon, he's a sex offender. Yeah, he said the girl lied. I'm like, it says the girl was 13, and then I did the math on his age. I said he was 24. So it ain't no lie there. Yeah, but he did his time. And I'm like, nah, nope. I was like, you need to leave him alone. Over the course of the years, I would tell her, you need to leave him alone. He was not good to her. He did not treat her well. He did not teach the children well at all. He fathered them. He created them, but he was not a father figure that I would have tried to hang on to for the kids. But anyways, I looked on the sex offender registry and saw that he was not on there. So I called. And that's when they went after him, and eventually, maybe about 6 months later, he had to report. They register him, and he ended up on the sex offender registry. But
So
get
he
this,
was supposed to be on the registry the whole time.
the whole time, and this was like 12 years ago. But get this, his last report is 2019. He hasn't reported for his sex offender registry since 2019. So he probably wasn't reporting it very often in between those times either. This is what troubles me. I made this complaint in April of 2022. And there were several other complaints by myself, Kiwana, and other family members after that. This man had a CPS case basically stating the same thing in 2015 and 2018 from completely different families.
Yeah, sure did. And also,
no girlfriend.
By September of 2023, Naziah was pregnant and Butts was the father. On September 26, 2023, she sent him a series of messages telling him her period had not come since her recent hospital visit and that she was scared and did not know what to do. She begged him to bring her a pregnancy test quietly. He agreed. By November, the pregnancy was confirmed between them in their messages. She wrote to him, "I need you to bring me what I need tonight. It's hard doing all this gym stuff with this baby, and if I don't do them, I'm going to get an F." She was worried about failing gym class while carrying his child. Butts did not take her to a doctor or come forward. Instead, his Google search history from December 8th through December 11th of 2023 showed him repeatedly searching for abortion pills, Planned Parenthood services, over-the-counter abortion options, herbal teas marketed online as home abortion methods, and how to use a drug called misoprostol without medical help. And then, at the very end of those searches, he typed in the words, "Can I drink red antifreeze?" He worked around antifreeze every single day at his shop and was thinking about giving it to her. 6 weeks after those searches, Naziah Harris was dead. January 9th, 2024 started like any other school day for Naziah. She went to J.E. Clark Preparatory Academy, used her school-issued tablet to take a selfie that morning in her regular school outfit, and sent a message to Butts confirming that she would meet up with him after school. Surveillance cameras caught her on the bus in the morning. She went through her school day. She got off the bus that afternoon at the stop near Cornwall Street and 3 Mile Road on Detroit's east side, and no one in the public ever saw her again. She met Butts and his coworker right after getting off the bus and went to his auto shop on Connor Street. Butts' own sister, Tawana Butts, was at that shop that afternoon and later testified that she saw a young girl she did not recognize getting in and out of a white Cadillac Escalade between 4:30 and 6 in the evening. She thought the child was just someone's niece dropping by. She left the shop around 6:30 that evening and went on with her night. She had no idea she had just seen Naziah Harris for the last time.
So, from the very beginning, where is it that you think you saw Naziah?
At the shop on Harbor Encounters.
Okay, and whose shop is that?
My brother Jarvis Butts and his partner.
Okay. What's the reason you were at your brother's shop that day?
Something was wrong with the car that I was driving, and I just needed him to check it out to make sure it was safe for me to drive.
Okay. Do you recall about what time did you go to Jarvis's shop that day?
About 4 p.m., give or take a few minutes.
Okay. And around what time did you leave?
Somewhere between 6 and 6:30.
Okay. And what is it that you noticed while you were at the shop?
So, it's a 2 car, like garage. So I was sitting outside of the shop in my car because they were working on another car on the inside. As I sat there for the time that I was there, I kept seeing a little girl get in and out of his truck, going to the gas station and going back to his car.
Okay, so I'm going to stop you right there. Whose car are we talking about?
My brother.
Okay, and what kind of car was it?
I believe a Cadillac Escalade.
Okay. Do you remember what color?
Kind of like a pearl white, off white cream color.
Okay, and you described this as like a two garage shop.
Yes.
From the shop, Butts, Naziah, and his coworker drove out to Ypsilanti, which is about 40 minutes outside Detroit, before coming back to the city later that same evening. Then Butts checked in to the Park Crest Motel in Harper Woods, a suburb just outside Detroit, around 9:30 at night. After that, there is no further record of her being alive. January 9th, 2024 didn't come home for Naziah. Her grandmother Annette Harris reported her missing and told investigators she had never run away before and never once missed school without a reason. The search started immediately, and within a short time, investigators pulled phone data from Naziah's school device that pointed at Butts being the last person she was in contact with. Cell phone data also revealed that Butts had been in the area near the Rouge River, close to 7 Mile and Berg Road, between roughly 11:40 at night on January 10th and 1:34 in the morning on January 11th. That location would end up being one of the most important pieces of the whole case. Weeks after Naziah disappeared, investigators found her clothing near the banks of the Rouge River, right around that same 7 Mile and Berg Road area. A United States Border Patrol agent named Wyatt Barnes, who was part of a multi-agency search team working the riverbanks, found a pink inside-out jumpsuit, a black jacket, a red and black Nike shoe, and other clothing items that matched exactly what Naziah had been wearing the day she disappeared. Weeks after Naziah disappeared, investigators found her clothing near the banks of the Rouge River, right around that same 7 Mile and Berg Road area. A United States Border Patrol agent named Wyatt Barnes, who was part of a multi-agency search team working the riverbanks, found a pink inside-out jumpsuit, a black jacket, a red and black Nike shoe, and other clothing items that matched exactly what Naziah had been wearing the day she disappeared. Agent Barnes' reading on these clothes was that they were fresh, no fading, no damage from weather, or any signs that animals had touched them. They looked like they had just been placed there recently, and at least one item showed damage that pointed to a possible struggle.
Do you get a look at this little girl that you see getting in and out of his car?
I saw her, as she was walking. I never saw her face.
Did you see any clothing?
I did.
Okay. Did anything about the clothing stick out to you that you remember?
I just remember her having on a colorful jacket.
Okay.
I needed to use the restroom, so I asked his partner if I could use the restroom. He told me to go and tell him in the gas station. And as I was walking towards the gas station, she was walking in front of me, going into the gas station.
And you said you never got a chance to see this little girl's face?
No.
Was there anything else about her that you can remember?
I just remember her being kind of small, like outside of just seeing her get in and out of the car. When I was walking towards her, I was like, she's tiny, and I just remembered the coat.
And did you ever ask Jarvis who the little girl was?
Yes.
And what did he tell you?
He told me, and I can't remember if it was this exact word, or he said it's my partner's niece, or he said it was King's niece.
Okay, but you knew who he was referring to?
Yes.
Okay. So you went and told him that you hadn't seen anyone out at the shop besides your nieces and then the one little girl you saw that one day?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ask him about that little girl?
Well, I didn't ask him about it. After I mentioned to him that I had only saw my nieces and one particular little girl, he then told me that that was Naziah that I saw that day, and I was there.
Tawana Butts, who had seen the girl at the shop that afternoon, identified those clothes as matching what Naziah was wearing on January 9th, and Butts' DNA was found on the clothing. Then, in March of 2024, a Detroit resident named Valerie Smith found Naziah's school ID on the sidewalk near 7 Mile and Evergreen, about 1.5 miles from where the clothing had been found. She told investigators she had been stepping over it for nearly 2.5 weeks before she finally picked it up, saw the name, recognized it from news coverage, and called the police. Naziah's body was never publicly found, but investigators had more than enough to build a case. Butts was arrested in September of 2024 and charged with first-degree premeditated murder, sexually abusive activity, and second-degree criminal sexual conduct. He went in labeled a fourth-time habitual offender, meaning the courts had been aware of his pattern for close to 30 years.
Wayne County prosecutor says a 13-year-old girl who has been missing since getting off her school bus in January was sexually assaulted and killed, and that the man responsible now faces charges. Police say this is the last known photo of Naziah Harris. She's inside her classroom, smiling and waving at the tablet. CBS News Detroit's Gino Vici has been following this story since the beginning. He joins us live with the latest developments after speaking with the girl's family. Gino?
Yeah, Rochelle, I spoke to Naziah's family, who says, sadly, this is what they feared all along, that she had been killed. But as you can imagine, this was still very difficult and heartbreaking to hear this information confirmed by the prosecutor and police.
You just hope that it doesn't come true, and unfortunately, in this instance, it was.
Naziah Harris' aunt, Roxy, says she's been holding out hope, praying her niece was still alive somewhere. But sadly, her worst fear confirmed this morning. She says she had a bad feeling it was this man, 41-year-old Jarvis Butts, who had something to do with Naziah's disappearance.
It was definitely a sense of release and a little bit of peace to hear that the person who we suspected, in the beginning, has been brought forth.
He was a classic and expert groomer and pedophile. The evidence shows overwhelmingly in this case that she is in fact deceased. The last time she was seen alive was January the 9th of this year, 2024.
Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy, alongside Detroit Police Chief James White, held a news conference today announcing charges against 41-year-old Jarvis Butts. Worthy says the evidence shows Naziah met up with Butts after school on January 9th, the last time she was seen alive.
We know that she did indeed meet up with the defendant that we're charging in this case. We also know that several people close to Mr. Butts, who we were charging later, saw them together in several different locations, people that he knew well. We have evidence that at 9:30 p.m. on that day, that Mr. Butts checked into a motel and that Naziah was never seen or heard from again.
Butts has been locked up since February for an unrelated sexual assault charge and carrying a concealed weapon. Another shocking discovery about Harris's disappearance. Worthy says the evidence shows a long history of Butts sexually abusing her, and text messages revealed he got her pregnant.
And he knew she was pregnant. We know that he was also searching for ways to abort the baby.
Investigators searched neighborhoods, bodies of water, phone records, social media, and thousands of other pieces of evidence. Worthy says the evidence collected against Butts is thorough and overwhelming.
Today we are charging Jarvis Butts with one count of first-degree premeditated murder, one count of criminal sexual conduct in the second degree, and one count of child sexually abusive material.
Worthy says Butts was very intentional about sexually abusing young girls.
Mr. Butts targeted and befriended women who had to have sexual relationships with their young daughters. He would have relationships with their mothers, but his true desire was to have sex with their young daughters. That's what the evidence will show.
Meanwhile, Naziah's family says they are devastated, but they do feel one step closer to learning exactly what happened to their loved one and why.
We got some answers and we got some justice for her today. And hopefully when everything comes out in the trial, we'll definitely be able to finally get that closure that we need.
Now, Rochelle, to be clear, Naziah's body has not been found yet. And get this, Worthy also announced 2 other sexual assault charges against Jarvis Butts involving 2 other young girls under the age of 13. Meanwhile, he is expected to be arraigned tomorrow morning inside a 36th District Court for the disappearance and death of Naziah Harris. Back to you.
There's a heartbreaking case here, and learning that it's an expanded case. We'll certainly be following this for some time. Gino, thank you for that live report.
The preliminary examination, which is the hearing where a judge decides if there's enough evidence to move forward to trial, ran over 4 days in January of 2025. About 23 witnesses testified, including family members, law enforcement, forensic experts, and the Border Patrol agent who found the clothing. The evidence file was massive, over 500 gigabytes of phone extractions alone, and it laid out everything Butts had done and how carefully he had hidden it. When it was all over, 36th District Court Judge Aaliyah Sabri found that there was more than enough evidence to send the case to trial. But before she wrapped up, she said what was on everyone's mind. Judge Sabri said directly from the bench, Naziah deserved so much more. And while I mentioned that other people have failed her, Jarvis Butts, you are the monster in this whole picture. She called him the true definition of a predator and said the messages between him and Naziah were disgusting to hear. On how Naziah died, she said, it appears he intended to perform what he thought was a do-it-yourself evacuation on Naziah, and it went south. And instead of seeking medical attention for her, he intentionally killed her and tried his best to cover it up. She did not stop there. She went after the whole system, the family for not catching the signs, the school counselor who was not there on the day Naziah needed to talk to someone, the men in the community who saw Butts always hanging around young girls at his shop and said nothing, and the broader failure to protect Black girls. It was the kind of statement that cut through everything.
Before I get into the charges, and the main charge of premeditated first-degree murder, I have to speak on Naziah Harris and the community who failed her. And I am only presented with certain evidence. I don't know the whole story. The attorneys know more than me, the family knows more than me, but from what I have heard over the last 4 days and 5 days total, is that several people failed her. I don't know where her mother is. I don't know anything other than that she was forced to live in a home where she was not protected or given the adequate attention and love. I don't know where her father is. I don't have any mention of him in her life, no presence. To Cordell, AKA King, and all the men who saw Jarvis Butts hanging out and always around these young girls, including Naziah, and his 9-year-old daughter going up to the shop to clean up his shop. The school counselor who never showed up, or the person who was supposed to show up if that counselor was absent, after Naziah was on the floor on the day she went missing, saying that she needed to speak to someone and speak to a counselor. There's no mention of CPS, but I wonder what their involvement was over the years, because this was not just a one-year thing. There are text messages at least from 2022. To her adoptive grandmother, Annette Harris, whose testimony, in my opinion, was very questionable. I understand why the people put her on the stand to establish Naziah's residence and the houses on Bedford and the regular routine, to establish also that Naziah was not a runaway child, that she was not a bad kid. I do believe she adopted Naziah. I do believe that she had 6 kids in the house. I believe that Naziah had on a dark hoodie the day she went missing, and that she had on red and black Nikes that day. What is hard to believe is that the defendant never came into the house as she testified. And there was also a minor that testified that he did as well. Text messages that show between him and Naziah that he did. In the basement, saying he was going to the shower, stealing her panties. He was always lurking around that house and asking for Janiyah and Zaniyah, from what I know. I even thought about the breakfast routine and saying that all the kids like eating breakfast at school. Did they have a choice? I don't know. But to always send those girls up there to clean up the shop raises questions. And how were there 2 women in that house who have birthed children themselves who did not notice that Naziah was pregnant, and I believe she was, and not having her period anymore? But then after hearing text messages today, begging Jarvis for pads as if she didn't have anyone else to give them for her. And what stood out the most was when Annette Harris stood on the stand, and she learned around 6 p.m. that Naziah did not come home from school and said she looked around for her and decided to wait until the next morning to call the police. Without a tear, without emotion, or any expression of being devastated. And to her Aunt Shannon, who also showed no emotion, expression of being devastated from Naziah going missing. She stated that she had friends help look for Naziah, but was directed to just wait until the morning to call the police. A grown woman who likely suspected something strange going on didn't feel the need to call the police either. They were both able to go to sleep at night without hearing from Naziah or having any indication that she was coming home at night. Mr. Butt, stand up. You've been sitting over there for 4 days with your head down, hidden between and behind your attorneys, with your mask on, and taking vigorous notes. I want you to pay attention and listen to everything I have to say. I have been trying to figure out for the last 5 days, you. At one point, I thought you were cognitively impaired in the beginning of this exam. And then maybe you had the brain of a 10-year-old, and that's why you were doing such things. But as I heard more and more testimony, you're just the true definition of a pedophile. Watching you laugh and brag about all the women you have with different women and the children and the girlfriends, and making babies to groom them, and having them in your presence, cleaning up, quote, cleaning up your shop, and the little girls around you, has landed you here today. You groomed Naziah. You played mind games with her. We all heard that. You controlled her emotionally. She was exposed to so much at such a young age. The text messages between you two were disgusting to hear. And to think that she had you saved in her phone as bae for life. Naziah deserves so much more. And while I mentioned other people that failed her, Jarvis Butts, you are the monster in this whole picture. She did deserve love from her parents and everyone who was in her life. She was ignored, she was neglected, and you took complete advantage of that. She wanted someone to love her, and she will never know what that feels like. Your children deserve more.
The hearing closed on January 9th, 2025, exactly 1 year to the day that Naziah had vanished. On February 12th, 2026, Jarvis Butts walked into Wayne County Circuit Court and pleaded guilty, not to the original first-degree murder charge, but to second-degree murder and Naziah's death. He also pleaded guilty to 1 count of criminal sexual conduct in 5 separate cases involving other girls who were between the same age as Naziah when he abused them. 6 cases, all wrapped up in one agreement. The part of the deal that mattered most to the family was this: Butts was required to give prosecutors a truthful statement about where Naziah's body was. Wayne County Prosecutor Kim Worthy said clearly one of the most important aspects of the plea agreement was giving Naziah's family some semblance of closure. The disclosure of the location of her body was crucial. She said the office was satisfied with what he gave them. That statement was never made public and was shared privately with the family members who had been closest to Naziah before she disappeared. A source close to the investigation told Detroit's WIDV News that Butts said he had dumped her body in the Rouge River near 7 Mile and Berg Road, the exact area where phone data had placed him the night after she went missing, and where her clothing was later found. Detroit police started searching based on that information. As of this video, Naziah's remains have not been publicly recovered. On March 12, 2026, in Wayne County Circuit Court, Butts walked in wearing a green jail uniform with a paper mask covering his face. He sat down, looked at the floor, and stayed quiet for most of what came next. The room around him was not quiet at all. 7 people gave victim impact statements that day, and within the first few minutes, the gallery erupted. People were screaming, bailiffs were moving through the crowd, and the noise continued even after some people were taken out into the hallway. Judge Hathaway had to stop the proceedings more than once to bring things back under control. Naziah's grandmother, Annette Harris, was the first one to speak. She broke down multiple times while speaking. She talked about waking up depressed every single morning and how strangers had been driving past her house to take pictures of her family, receiving threats, and how she no longer felt safe in her own neighborhood. Naziah's aunt, Marquetta Harris, who is Shannon's twin sister, came to that podium with something different on her mind. She wasn't there to weep, but to speak directly to Butts. She called him a serial, habitual predator and told the court she wanted him to face the death penalty. She said she'd never get to hold Naziah again. Then, one of the young women Butts had been abusing since she was 4 years old came forward. She'd once called him Dad. She stood in that courtroom as a young woman and told him exactly what his actions had done to her life. Another victim pointed out that Butts was already a convicted offender when he intimately touched her in 2014. He had served time, been given a second chance, and immediately used that second chance to hurt more children. Then Tawana Butts, his own sister, walked up without a written statement. She had seen Naziah at the shop on the day she disappeared and had carried that with her ever since. She spoke directly to his brother, looking at him while she said it. Judge Hathaway sentenced Butts to 35 to 60 years for the second-degree murder of Naziah Harris, with no chance of parole for at least 35 years. The 5 criminal sexual conduct cases each carried 10 to 15 years, all running at the same time as the murder sentence. He was 43 years old at sentencing, meaning under this sentence he wouldn't even be considered for parole until he was 78 years old at the earliest. Before Butts was walked out by the sheriffs, Judge Hathaway told him, "Justice is blind, but eventually, Mr. Butts, justice sees everything." However, Butts never made it to a permanent prison. On Thursday, March 26, 2026, exactly 2 weeks after that sentencing, staff at the Charles Egler Reception and Guidance Center in Jackson, Michigan, found Jarvis Butts unresponsive in his cell during their morning rounds. The Charles Egler Reception and Guidance Center is where Michigan sends newly sentenced prisoners first. It's a holding and processing facility where new inmates go through health checks and mental evaluations before being assigned somewhere permanent. Butts had only been there for 2 weeks, and the staff attempted to revive him but couldn't. MDOC spokeswoman Jenny Reilly confirmed the death to the press, saying the department was reporting it as a suicide. The Michigan State Police investigation was still ongoing at the time this video was made.
Now to our other big story at 5. Jarvis Butts, the man convicted of killing 13-year-old Naziah Harris and sexually assaulting her and other girls, is dead after weeks after being sentenced. His body found at a prison intake center in Jackson. Fox 2's Lauren Edwards is live in Detroit with reaction tonight. Lauren.
Rube, just as you said, Jarvis Butts was found dead, and this happening 2 weeks after he was sentenced for killing Naziah Harris. And just the location of her body is basically, at this point, it's a bit of a mystery. Detroit police are on it, but let's get into all the details because there is so much that you need to know. Now, this is the Charles Egler Reception and Guidance Center in Jackson. It's a prison intake center where the Michigan Department of Correction confirms that Jarvis Butts' body was found 2 weeks ago. 43-year-old Butts was sentenced in the murder of 13-year-old Naziah Harris, sentenced to 35 to 60 years. He pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, and as a part of the plea deal, he was supposed to provide information as to where her body was. And Wayne County Prosecutor's Office says he did exactly that. Harris was last seen in January 2024, and prosecutors say she met up with Butts the day that she disappeared, and she was pregnant. Allegedly, Butts, the father of that child. And fast forward Thursday, MDOC says he took his own life. MDOC says the staff tried to save his life but were unsuccessful. So again, the prosecutor's office saying that Butts did provide information, and then she referred us over to Detroit Police Department, and we spoke with DPD, and they say that they are investigating, they are searching for her body, and that they are looking into every lead. Please stick with Fox 2 as this continues to develop. Reporting live here in Detroit, Lauren Edwards, Fox 2 News.
Yeah, Lauren, I know that obviously people who are being transported are being supervised. Any idea as to if this happened at a time that he just wasn't being watched or any of those details?
You know, Ruth, there's so many questions as to exactly how this all unfolded. Those are questions that I have, that you have, that we hope to get answers about, you know, when and how all this exactly happened. So all I can say at this time is that please continue to stick with us as I get these updates.
We begin with a stunning development in a case that captured headlines nationwide. The Detroit man convicted of murdering 13-year-old Naziah Harris was found dead in prison this morning.
A spokesperson from the Michigan Department of Corrections told us Jarvis Butts died by suicide as state police follow up with an investigation.
Welcome to CBS News Detroit at 5. I'm Terrence Friday.
And I'm Rochelle Graham in for Shayna Humphreys. Back in February, Butts pleaded guilty to the murder of Naziah Harris, along with 5 separate sexual assault cases. CBS News Detroit's Jack Springate spoke to one of Naziah's family members. Jack.
Well, the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office told us after his sentencing that Jarvis Butts needed to submit a truthful statement regarding Naziah Harris's body, but that isn't being made public. However, they did say the statements were crucial in bringing closure to some members of Naziah's family.
We, as well as other family members and the public, have been waiting, for 2 years now to know, where Naziah is.
However, Naziah's adult cousin, Roxy, says she's still waiting. She claims the only family members who saw the statement are the ones Naziah lived with when she went missing.
They apparently only have knowledge of that information.
That was on January 9th, 2024, when the 13-year-old was last seen getting off her bus on Detroit's east side. Police conducted numerous searches, but they never found her body. Butts pleaded guilty to murdering her on February 12th of this year. Butts' death comes 2 weeks after a judge sentenced him to up to 60 years in prison for murdering Naziah. He was also serving time for sex crimes against 4 other survivors.
I did get to talk to one survivor today. She expressed to me that she can finally breathe after feeling suffocated for so many years.
Roxy says she's working to create the Naziah Rapid Response Recovery Team to help get answers and advocate for families with similar cases. Now, we may still find out where Naziah's body is, as the Detroit Police Department issued a statement saying they're still committed to searches in hopes of finding Naziah's body. Now, the Michigan Department of Corrections told us they couldn't say whether Butts had any cellmates, while the Michigan State Police continue their investigation. Live in studio, I'm Jack Springate, CBS News Detroit.
All right, thank you, Jack. Of course, we'll keep following that story.
Naziah's cousin, Roxy, gave her reaction to Fox 2 Detroit when she heard the news.
Fox 2 spoke with Harris's cousin Roxy, who was out of town, about what happened and the concerns the family still has.
We ultimately, want to still know where she is because we still don't have those answers. We just want to lay her to rest and things like that. So there's still a lot of unanswered questions, and him doing deciding to take his own life was unexpected, literally 2 weeks after the sentencing. He made his bed, he got to lay in it. I think it was a bit of a cowardly way out, but, he made his bed, so he has to lay in it.
Family friend and former Detroit Board of Police Commissioners Vice President Tamara Liberty Smith called Butts a demonic force and said she felt justice had not been fully served. She was frustrated specifically with how the plea deal played out. With a plea, you give us something, we give you this, and we didn't get that. Just saying you threw her in the river isn't good enough, because the body still hasn't been found and the man who knew where to look is gone. Detroit police have said they are still working the leads from Butts' statement, and the search continues. But the person who could physically walk someone to the exact spot, who could have given the family something real to hold on to, chose to check out instead. One of the survivors told cousin Roxy she could finally breathe after feeling like she had been suffocating for years. And there's something real in that. Butts will never touch another young one again.
I'm working on some projects now to honor Naziah. All proceeds will go towards helping young women that has been in abusive and sexually abusive situations. And there's more to come with that. I will come back and disclose all information. It's being built up now. And so stay tuned, because I'm coming. We're coming.
Amen to
Amen.
that.
Amen.
Amen to that.
What do you think about this case? Do you think Butts really killed himself, or something else is at play here? Let me know in the comments section. Also, click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this. See you in the next one.